A mother stood outside her home, gathering sticks. Not for a family dinner, but for a final meal. Inside her house was only a handful of flour and a small jar of oil. Just enough to bake one last piece of bread. One for her, and one for her son. After that, there would be nothing left. But before she could return home, a stranger called out to her. The land had not seen rain for months. The rivers were dry. The fields were empty. This terrible famine had spread across the region during the days of Elijah, the prophet of God. People everywhere were running out of food. But in a small town called Zarephath, one widow had reached the very end. She had no husband, no provider, only a hungry child, and the last ingredients in her house. As the widow bent down to gather sticks, a voice spoke from the gate of the town. "Please bring me a little water to drink." She turned. Standing there was a tired traveler. His robe was dusty from the road. His beard was thick and untrimmed. It was the prophet Elijah. The widow nodded politely and began walking to get the water.
"The Lord has sent
Then
me."
Elijah spoke again.
Why have you come?
"And please, bring me a piece of
Please,
bread."
bring me a piece of
She
bread.
froze.
I have not baked. Only
Slowly,
a handful
the
of
widow
flour.
turned back,
Do not be afraid.
voice was
the Lord
calm.
will provide for you.
but
I have
filled
so
with
little
sorrow.
left.
Your jar will
"As
not
surely
empty.
as the Lord
Have
your
faith.
God lives," she said, "I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar, and a little oil in a jug. I'm gathering these sticks so I can go home and cook it. For me and my son. So we may eat it. And die." There was no anger in her voice. Only exhaustion. And the quiet acceptance of someone who had nothing left. Then Elijah said something unexpected. "Don't be afraid. Go home and
The
do
Lord
what you
has
said.
spoken. You will not lack.
But first,
How can this be?
make
the
a
Lord
small
provides.
loaf of bread
Trust
for
in
me.
His plan.
I believe.
First, before feeding herself, before feeding her son, before the last meal was gone, Elijah asked her to trust God. Then Elijah gave her a promise. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. It sounded impossible. But sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest acts of faith. The widow stood silently. She looked at the sticks in her hands. She thought about her hungry son waiting inside. This was everything she had left. If the prophet was wrong, they would starve. But if he was telling the truth, God himself would provide. Finally, she turned and walked home. Inside her small house, she poured the flour. Still there. She tilted the oil. Still flowing. She baked the bread. First for Elijah. Then for her son. Then for herself. That night, for the first time in many days, they ate. The next morning, the widow looked inside the jar again. There was still flour. She checked the jug. Still oil. Day after day. Meal after meal. The jars never emptied. Just as God had promised through Elijah. The famine continued. But inside that little house, God provided. Every single day. The miracle did not begin with abundance. It began with trust. The widow gave the little she had. And God made it enough. Because sometimes, God doesn't fill our lives with overflowing supplies. Sometimes, He simply makes sure the jar never runs empty. That widow thought she was preparing her last meal. But instead, she became part of one of the most beautiful miracles in the Bible. All because she trusted God. With her last handful of flour.
Don't forget to subscribe and share for more amazing content.